Okay, let's get into this. Imagine San Francisco, mid-1970s. It's this vibrant city, lots going on, but there's also this kind of dark undercurrent starting. People are finding bodies. Men, all killed brutally with a knife.
Right. And what really makes this case stand out, what you hear whispered in the sources, is this really chilling detail. The killer might have actually sketched his victims before he killed them.
It's just, wow. And it's a case that, well, it terrified the city back then, and it's still unsolved today, really. A potential serial killer targeting a specific community.
And the investigation faced huge challenges because of the times, societal views. Plus, they had a prime suspect, but could never legally prove it. It's a 50-year-old cold case, technically.
So that's our job today in this deep dive. We've got all the source material, articles, research, our notes, and we're going to pull out the key stuff, the essential facts, basically give you the fast track to understanding this really complex and honestly quite tragic story.
Yeah, we're digging into the case of the killer they nicknamed the Doodler.
We'll look at the victims, the hurdles the police faced, the leads that seemed so close, and why it's still unresolved after all this time.
It's a story packed with violence, yeah, but also societal prejudice, and these awful choices people were forced to make back then, a very different time.
So where does it all begin, the first thread?
It starts January 27th, 1974, really early morning in San Francisco. An anonymous 911 call comes in. Someone found a body on the beach near Ulloa Street.
And it wasn't straightforward. When the officers got there, the body was literally at the water's edge. The tide was actually starting to take it.
Yeah, they had to wade into the freezing water to pull him out.
Wow.
And right away, it was obvious this wasn't just some accident. He was covered in stab wounds. The sources say 17 stab wounds. Chest, torso, front, back, everywhere. Definitely a homicide.
But okay, here's something that immediately jumps out investigation-wise. The call came in super early. It's like 2 a.m. And that part of the beach, pitch black. No lights.
Right, so the police are thinking, how did this caller even see the body? It raises questions.
And the caller vanished before the police got there. Wouldn't give a name.
The sources are pretty clear that this beach area, and especially the nearby restrooms, it was a known spot for gay men to meet up, a cruising area.
So the thinking is the caller was likely part of that scene and just terrified of being identified, being outed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Identifying himself to police in 1974 could have had huge consequences for him. Plus, the police put out requests for the caller to come forward, but nope, silence.
And the victim himself, no ID, right? The water complicates things too.
Yeah, no wallet, nothing. And the ocean definitely washed away potential evidence. The body was in the early stages of rigor mortis, suggesting death maybe 2 to 6 hours before he was found.
But they did manage to identify him.
Relatively quickly, yeah. A couple of days. Gerald Kavanaugh, he was 50, a World War II vet. Identification likely came from fingerprints, possibly from a prior police encounter.
And that prior encounter, the sources mentioned he'd actually been stopped by police before, right in that same area.
Suspected of public sex in those same restrooms near the beach? It just reinforces that location as a specific spot.
Okay, so first victim. Brutal murder. What was the initial police reaction, according to the material?
Well, it's striking. It doesn't seem like it got the major push you'd expect. The perception, at least initially, was maybe it was a one-off incident.
Not a huge public effort.
Not really reported as such. And the feeling in the community, particularly the gay community, was that the police weren't doing much. This really points to that strained, often hostile relationship between the SFPD and gay people in San Francisco back then.
Okay, so that's Gerald Kavanaugh in January. Then fast forward 5 months, June 1974.
Another body turns up, this time in Golden Gate Park, which is, interestingly, only about 1.5 miles from where Gerald was found.
Another stabbing?
Yep, 5 stab wounds this time, 3 directly to the heart. He was fully clothed, no ID on him initially, but the scene, it told a different story than the beach.
How so?
There were clear signs of a struggle. A pool of blood was found about 10 feet away from the body, and there were drag marks leading to where he was eventually left. Suggests he fought back, maybe he was killed elsewhere nearby, and then moved.
And wasn't there something about someone hearing screams?
Yeah, the sources mention a resident nearby heard screams the night before. But it's kind of unclear from the material how seriously that lead was pursued at the time. Another what if.
Who was this victim?
He was identified quickly. Joseph J. Stevens, just 27. And Jay was, well, he was kind of famous in the city's drag scene. A really beloved performer, the MC, at a club called Pinocchio's. Drag royalty, basically.
The sources note his sister felt he might identify as trans today, though he used he, him pronouns them. But Definitely a visible figure in the queer community.
Absolutely. And his last known sighting was leaving a club way over in North Beach. That's a significant distance to Golden Gate Park.
Suggesting he probably drove, but his car wasn't there.
Right, his car was missing. And this led to this completely wild, almost unbelievable twist. Jay's car turns up like 45 minutes away, over in Hayward. It had crashed into a house after a police chase.
Wait, what? So the driver?
Police initially thought, okay, this has got to be the killer. But no. Turns out it was just a random car thief. He'd stolen the car from Golden Gate Park after the murder likely happened. His alibi checked out. He was ruled out. Just another dead end.
Unbelievable. So frustrating for the investigation. And the police mindset at this point, still seeing these as separate.
Seems like it, based on the sources. Still largely treated as individual homicides. Still that kind of feeling of, well, we tried.
And we need to keep stressing that context, the police-community relationship.
It's absolutely crucial. Ron Huberman, who's cited in the sources, talks about how bad it was. Rampant hate crimes against gay people, police actively enforcing so-called morality laws, even entrapping gay men using decoys in public places like parks and restrooms.
So if you were a victim of a crime, especially a violent one, you might be terrified to even report it.
Exactly. You feared being arrested yourself or publicly shamed, outed. There was even a major lawsuit settled that very year, 1974, against SFPD for brutality against a gay man. That tells you something about the climate.
So you've got this community under attack, facing violence, but also deeply, deeply distrustful of the police who were supposed to protect them.
Right. So even with a second victim found nearby, similar method, still no dedicated task force, no public warning connecting these murders.
But then the pace picked up dramatically just 12 days after Jay Stevens was found.
The third victim, Klaus Chrisman, 31 years old. Found back on the beach, eerily close to where Gerald Kavanaugh's body was discovered months before.
And this one was particularly brutal, right?
Extremely. The sources describe him as nearly decapitated. One of the original investigators quoted said it was one of the most horrific scenes he'd ever encountered, comparing it to the Zodiac killings that were also plaguing the city.
Wow, and close.
Younger white guy, also fully clothed, no ID on him. Took about 2 weeks to figure out who he was. Turned out he was a German national, visiting friends who lived in the Castro.
Which was, and is, a major center for the gay community in SF.
Exactly. He was known to frequent gay bars there, last seen leaving one alone. Police checked out his known contacts, but, again, hit a wall.
So, 3 victims now, similar circumstances, locations, community targeted. Did the police finally connect the dots publicly?
Not publicly, no task force yet. But internally, according to the sources, the chatter finally started. Some officers began saying, hey, wait a minute. They saw the pattern, queer victims, the locations, the stabbing method. But a formal progress. Still stalled.
But the community itself, they must have been terrified.
Oh, absolutely. Without official warnings, they were relying on their own networks. Word was spreading fast within the gay community. Be careful, watch out. Something dangerous is happening. Their own warning system was kicking in.
Okay, so after Klaus, things went quiet for a bit.
Yes, a significant gap. Weeks turned into months. It started to feel like maybe it was over. Almost a year passed.
And it wasn't over.
No. May 12th, 1975. The killer returns. Another body back on the beach. Bloody drag marks again. Same grim signature.
And that finally forced the SFPD's hand.
Yes, it was undeniable now. The killer was still out there, still active. They realized they had to dedicate real, focused resources to this.
And this is where we learned something interesting about how SFPD actually worked back then.
Right. The sources point out a major systemic issue. Homicide cases weren't typically assigned to one investigator start to finish. They were handled by shift.
Meaning different cops were picking up the same case file on different days.
Exactly. Imagine trying to connect subtle clues or build a profile of a serial killer when the investigation keeps changing hands. It's incredibly inefficient, almost designed not to catch someone like this.
So they finally changed that for these cases.
They did. They formed a dedicated team, and this is a really significant moment. Inspectors Rota, Guilford, and Earl Sanders took over.
And they were notable figures, right?
Very. They were the first and second black homicide investigators in SFPD history, known informally but respectfully as the Soul Brothers. They brought a completely new energy and approach.
And they had a new victim to identify.
Yes. Frederick Kappen, 32 years old. He was identified because he was a registered nurse, so his prints were on file with the state.
And his murder? Similar pattern.
Very similar. Stabbed 16 times. And like Gerald Kavanaugh, the scene suggested he fought hard. drag marks, dried blood found on his shoes.
And Guilford and Sanders found a crucial link.
They did. They discovered Frederick Cappan was last seen at the same gay bar as the previous victim, Klaus Christmann, a place called Bojangles.
Okay, that solidifies the connection to the gay bar scene. Now, these investigators, Guilford and Sanders, they understood the huge trust issue with the community they needed help from, right?
Absolutely. And their strategy was pretty groundbreaking for the time. Instead of relying on victims coming to them, they went directly to the community. They started going into the gay bars themselves, talking to people openly, trying to build bridges.
That must have taken some courage, given the history. Did it work?
It seems it did start to make a difference, and that's when this key rumor surfaced. People started talking about this guy they'd seen hanging around the bars, a guy with a sketchbook.
Sketching.
Yeah, sketching men in the bars. And people realized, thinking back, that he'd been noticed around ever since the murders began.
A doodler. Before they could really chase that lead, though, another victim was found.
Right. June 4th, 1975. June 4th, 1975. Harold Goldberg, 66 years old, a sailor. His body was found in a really bad state, badly decomposed, almost mummified, made identification incredibly difficult. No usable prints.
But then the big break.
A survivor.
A massive break. July 1975, a man stumbles into an emergency room, bleeding heavily, says he's been stabbed. He identifies himself as a European diplomat.
Okay. But he didn't want the police involved. Adamantly not. Terrified of being outed, the scandal it would cause.
Yeah.
But Guilford and Sanders managed to talk to him, gently persuade him. And his story was absolutely critical.
What did he say happened?
He described meeting this young black man, handsome, seems like an artist type. The guy was sketching animals on a napkin in a diner near a gay bar. The diplomat, who actually had some art training himself, struck up a conversation about art.
And invited him back to his apartment.
Yes, and that's when it turned terrifying. The man went into the diplomat's bathroom and just stayed there for almost half an hour.
30 minutes. That's weird.
Very weird. The diplomat finally knocked, the door flies open, and the man lunges out with a steak knife from the kitchen, apparently growling something like, "You guys are all alike."
Chillin'.
He stabbed the diplomat 6 times before the knife actually broke off in the struggle. The diplomat fought back, somehow managed to escape his own apartment and get help.
And this encounter, the sketching part, that's where the nickname came from.
Exactly. Seeing the man sketching in the diner led the investigators to call him the Doodler.
And unbelievably, there was another survivor just 2 weeks later.
In the same puppet building. Even on the same floor as the diplomat.
Oh, way.
Yeah. This second victim said he was tied up and the attacker started beating him. Thankfully, neighbors heard the commotion and scared the attacker off before it got worse.
And did this second survivor hear anything?
Crucially, yes. He also reported hearing the attacker say, "All you guys are alike." That phrase became a key link, suggesting the same person, same possible motive.
And then there was a third survivor eventually identified.
Yes, later on they found out about a third survivor, described as a famous actor. His encounter apparently ended abruptly when a knife fell out of the suspect's pocket, basically revealing his intent.
And like the others.
He also refused to cooperate, didn't want to testify, didn't want to be involved publicly. The fear of being outed was just overwhelming.
So Guilford and Sanders have 3 survivors, 3 people who saw the attacker's face, but none of them will testify in court.
It was their biggest, most tragic obstacle. The diplomat, being the least intoxicated during the attack and having that art background, was the best hope for getting a good likeness.
Did he eventually agree to help with the sketch?
He did, eventually, but only the sketch. He was adamant. No testimony. It just highlights that impossible choice these men faced: personal safety and anonymity versus helping catch a killer, potentially at the cost of their entire lives as they knew them.
So the composite sketch gets made and released in October '75. What happened then?
It triggered a flood of tips, people calling in, and 2 tips in particular stood out as incredibly important.
Okay.
First, an anonymous woman called. She gave really specific details about a possible suspect living over in the East Bay. At first, maybe it was dismissed because the name was common, but she called back, gave his address, even his license plate number. Very persistent.
Wow. And the second tip?
Came from inside Highland Hospital. A secretary called, said her boss, a psychiatrist, was treating this exact same guy the woman described. And this patient had confessed to the murders during therapy sessions.
A confession. In therapy.
Yeah. And it gets better. 3 days later, The psychiatrist himself contacted the police, confirmed everything his secretary said, confirmed the confession, and told Guilford and Sanders he strongly believed his patient was the Doodler.
That's huge. So they finally have their prime suspect.
They bring him in for questioning. January 1976. He comes in voluntarily, denies being the Doodler.
Right.
But interestingly, he admits he'd had homosexual experiences in the past.
Oh.
And he claimed that therapy had, quote, cured him of those desires.
That language, cured, it fits that potential profile,
Yeah.
right? Self-loathing, maybe projecting that onto others, explaining the "you guys are all alike" comment.
It certainly seemed to fit a psychological picture the investigators were considering. So now you've got a suspect, multiple credible tips pointing right at him, a psychiatrist confirming a confession, and one of the survivors actually picked him out of a photo lineup.
It sounds like they had him. So why did the case go cold for decades?
This is the absolute crux of it, based on everything we've reviewed. Without the survivors being willing to stand up in court and testify, point him out, recount the attacks, the district attorney felt they couldn't guarantee a conviction.
So, not enough evidence for trial, even with everything else.
Apparently, not enough admissible evidence or evidence strong enough to overcome reasonable doubt without that direct eyewitness testimony under oath. The sources basically say the case was solved in everything but name. The police felt they knew who did it, they just couldn't prove it legally.
Because of the fear, the societal pressure that silenced the victims.
Exactly. And notably, the murders in San Francisco stopped after 1976. The original investigators suspected that maybe once their suspect knew the police were onto him, he stopped killing, at least in SF.
And the case just sat there. For how long?
Until 2018, decades later. A retired inspector, Sergeant Dan Cunningham, working with another retired investigator, Dan Det, decided to take a fresh look.
40 years later, what was left of the files?
That was the problem. The original files were a mess.
Yeah.
Fragmented, incomplete, stuff missing. They basically had to rebuild the entire case from the ground up.
But starting fresh sometimes helps you see things differently.
Surprisingly, yes. It led them to uncover some new information, draw some new potential conclusions.
Like what?
Well, one of the biggest things was identifying a potential sixth deceased victim, bringing the total known targets to 9. His name was Warren Andrews.
When was he attacked?
He was actually found back on April 27, 1975. So, chronologically, before Frederick Kappan and Harold Goldberg. But he wasn't initially linked to the Doodler pattern.
Where was he found, and what was different?
Found clinging to life out at Land's End, which is another remote spot known as a gay cruising area back then. But the key difference the sources highlight: Warren Andrews wasn't stabbed. He'd been brutally beaten with a rock and a tree branch.
Beaten, not stabbed. Why link him then?
Well, Cunningham theorized, based on the location and timing, maybe the killer lost his knife during a struggle out there. Maybe the knife broke, like it did with the diplomat later. And he had to improvise with whatever was at hand.
Ah, okay. And Warren fit the victim profile otherwise.
Yes, thought to be gay, attacked in a known remote hookup spot. And Land's End isn't that far from where Harold Goldberg's body was later discovered. It seemed plausible.
So Cunningham's investigation is ongoing now. What's he looking into?
He's doing a few things. He's been researching similar unsolved murders or attacks in other locations after 1976, after the prime suspect left San Francisco, trying to see if the Doodler might have continued killing elsewhere.
That's a terrifying thought.
Isn't it? He's also submitted some remaining physical evidence from the original crime scenes for modern DNA testing. It's a long shot because the scenes were so bloody and contaminated even back then. But there's always hope technology might find something.
Has he talked to the original suspect again?
He has. The suspect is still alive, still lives in the East Bay area, and apparently he's now living openly as a gay man.
Oh, wow. The man who claimed therapy cured him.
The very same.
Uh-huh.
But he still denies any involvement in the Doodler murders, even though, according to reports, he still bears a resemblance to the age-progressed composite sketch from '75.
There's even some debate now about the nickname Doodler itself.
Yeah, Cunningham is a bit skeptical, thinks it might be more lore based just on the diplomat's specific story. But Ron Huberman, who we mentioned, feels strongly it was accurate based on accounts circulating in the community at the time about a guy sketching men in bars as a way to approach them.
Another mystery was that psychiatrist, Dr. Priest.
Right. The original file just had that name scribbled down. For years, investigators couldn't find any record of a Dr. Priest working at Highland Hospital back then.
Until recently.
Yes, through some serious digging in archives, a reporter and a PI working with Cunningham found him. Or rather, found the likely person, Dr. Howard Pree. spelled Priee.
And he did work at Highland in the 70s.
He did. His daughter was located. She confirmed her father treated the type of patient described, but she didn't have any of his old records.
So Cunningham tried to get official access to those records.
He went to court, requested access to Dr. Pree's patient files, hoping to find confirmation of the confession. But the judge denied the request.
Denied it. Why?
The judge's reasoning, as stated in the sources, was that there was no evidence the suspect, had posed a threat to anyone since 1976.
Wait, so because the potential threat stopped decades ago, that means the need for justice for the earlier victims, the ones who died, is somehow negated legally.
It raises a really profound question, doesn't it, about how we define threat, how we define justice, especially when decades have passed. It was a major setback for Cunningham's efforts.
So facing these dead ends, what did the police do?
They turned back to the public. Starting in 2019, SFPD made new appeals. They put up a significant reward, first $100,000, now it's $250,000.
$250,000.
For information leading to an arrest and conviction. They re-released the age-progressed composite sketch. And they even released a recording of that original anonymous 911 call from 1974.
The voice of the man who found Gerald Kavanaugh.
Yeah, hoping that maybe, after all these years, someone might recognize that voice and finally come forward. Sergeant Cunningham still holds out hope that some new technology, or maybe just one crucial phone call, could finally break the case open.
So let's recap the toll. We have 6 men, confirmed or strongly suspected deceased. Gerald Kavanaugh, Jay Stevens, Klaus Chrisman, Frederick Kappen, Harold Goldberg, and Warren Anders.
And at least 3 known survivors who were attacked. The European diplomat, the second man in that same building, and the famous actor. That's 9 known individuals targeted by this one person.
And the impact goes way beyond those 9, doesn't it? The ripple effects.
Oh, absolutely devastating. The sources mention Jay Stevens' family specifically. His sister had a complete psychotic break after his murder. Just 3 months later, in her distress, she tragically killed their mother and seriously injured another sister.
Oh my God, that's horrifying. It shows how this kind of violence just radiates outwards.
It really does. And Frederick Kappen's niece shared something really poignant, quoted in the materials. She just wants her uncle remembered for who he was, an artist, a dedicated nurse, even a war hero who'd saved lives in Vietnam, not just as a victim defined by how he died.
And she feels all the victims deserve that remembrance.
Exactly. Remembered for their lives, not just their deaths.
We're talking 50 years now since these murders shook San Francisco, half a century, and still no legal justice for these men, for their families.
A strong person of interest identified back in 1976 is still out there, living his life, all because the witnesses, the survivors who could have put him away, were silenced by the fear and prejudice of that era.
It's incredibly frustrating. Just to reiterate, SFPD does still want information. That $250,000 reward is real. The tip line is 415-575-4444.
And you can also text a tip to tip 411. You can remain anonymous.
It's a start case. A reminder, these aren't just old files. They're real people, real families, still living with the consequences.
Absolutely.
So as we finish this deep dive into the Doodler case, it really leaves you thinking, doesn't it? About some really heavy questions.
Yeah, like what does it really mean for justice when societal fear, when prejudice, acts as such a powerful barrier that it prevents a case from being legally closed for 50 years, even when investigators feel they know who did it?
And could Sergeant Cunningham be right? Could this killer's violence have continued beyond San Francisco after 1976? Is there a wider trail of victims out there we don't even know about?
Or maybe even just thinking about today. What would real meaningful justice even look like for these families now, after all this time? With the clock ticking, lots to think about.